Good morning. Welcome to this networking event on clean energy SMEs and emerging markets. I'm delighted to see so many of you here today and such a range of organisations represented. My name is Danielle Gent. I work at the Department of Energy and Climate Change. I'm also affiliated to the Low Carbon Energy for Development Network, which is a network of UK academics that focus on low carbon energy and international development issues. And one of the things the LCEDN tries to do is to provide a platform for interaction between that academic community, but also with the private sector, policy and civil society. Today is the product of a collaboration between various organisations, including the Department of Energy and Climate Change, the KTN, the Knowledge Transfer Network, Loughborough University, and the UK Collaborative on Development Science. Today we're going to be discussing some of the challenges and opportunities that small and medium-sized enterprises and social enterprises face in emerging markets. Today is about providing an arena for key stakeholders to interact and to stimulate cross-sectoral collaboration. I'd now like to introduce you to our conference chair, Dr. Andre Carter, who directs the UK Collaborative on Development Sciences, who is very kindly hosting us here today. Thank you very much. Andre.
Thanks very much, Danny, and thank you also for the initiative. We've held many initiatives here in the past with UK CDS, but I'm sure this is the first one that we've done on energy and bringing such a wide community together, so this is extremely welcome. Before I start with what I'm about to say, we've got some housekeeping, as you might imagine. This slide, sorry, could you give me the next slide? Is our evacuation procedure. So obviously if the fire alarm goes, it isn't a test, it is a real alarm, then please follow the marshals who will guide you down the various stairs that are up on this 6th floor. We also have an evacuation procedure, which I always like to say, because not many people have got one of those. This used to be the site of MI5 before this building was put here, and there are tunnels under the ground, so you can actually be evacuated as well as evacuated. So again, if there's any terrorist activity outside, we would evacuate you. So at least you can tell people that was a possibility. So today, as I said, this is a real opportunity, a networking event, bringing a very diverse audience together. We're actually seeing a renaissance in infrastructure research for development. Energy is at the vanguard of that, and DFID funding in 2008 was just £500,000, which is hardly anything, having come from quite a lot of investment in the past. But we're now seeing DFID wanting to invest far more, recognising that infrastructure and particularly energy are very important, and we'll hear from people from DFID later on today. But from an academic's perspective, there will be £15 million invested in this financial year around energy. We're also looking at seeing the Engineering Physical Sciences Research Council, traditionally investors in energy research, beginning to think about opportunities in international development. Only 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting between BIS, EPSRC's new chief executive, and the DFID chief scientist, and they have committed to working together in the future. We've got new funding from the Newton Fund, which is actually from BIS, which is ODA compliant, Overseas Development Assistance compliant. Historically, most of the funding for ODA funding came from DFID. So this is a new world we're working into, where BIS is actually providing ODA-type money to investors in research and into business as well. So that would have development objectives tied to it. We're also seeing a lot of interest now from UKTI, and particularly from the aid-funded business. And again, we've got somebody coming this afternoon to talk to you about aid-funded business. But I've had a long collaboration with TSB and now Innovate UK, and Janet, who's going to chair our next session, is working with them, looking at global challenges, looking at low-carbon energy, clean energy as a possible scoping topic in the future. So for us, this brings together an awful lot of interest. UK CDS comprises 14 organisations, That's 8 government departments, 5 research councils and the Wellcome Trust. So if you're wondering why you're in the Wellcome Trust, the Secretariat of 7 is actually hosted here, and we're very fortunate to be hosted here, dare I say that, other than in a government department or at Swindon with the research councils. So this is a lovely venue for this kind of meeting. So all of these funders have interest in international development to one extent or another. DFID, clearly it's its day job, whereas the research councils spend between 25 million, 50 million pounds a year around international development. On energy, that would be very much confined to EPSRC, but some of the social sciences would be ESRC. And then there's obviously the spin-offs that come from energy use, whether it be from the natural environment or whether it be from the health impacts, for example, with cook stoves. And that is a particular area of interest for the Wellcome Trust. So we bring these funders together and look for opportunities for them either to collaborate, add value to what they already do. We'll also look for gaps. Now this is one of those gaps, and Danny and her team, all the collaborators, have really brought together a real opportunity here, because this is a gap both in terms of the UK offer. There's far more that could be done. We know that only 1 in 5 UK SMEs export at all. So in terms of emerging economies, emerging markets, developing countries, there is a real win-win opportunity. So these are the markets of the future, but there's also opportunity to use business to drive development. When we were working and looking at the opportunities 3-4 years ago, we found it incredibly difficult to find someone who'd got knowledge of international development and has business acumen. And those two things in one person are still quite rare. And I would hope that what we see today at the beginning of communities coming together to create more and more of a community that does work together, and we can contribute through business to international development. So I'm looking forward to the discussions today. This fits really mainstream to what we do. We bring people together, we promote opportunities, and we share knowledge. So working with this team from DECC, from the KTN, from Low Carbon Energy for Development and Loughborough University is really mainstream to what we do. So thank you for that. And thank you all for coming. So again, some housekeeping. Mobile phones, please, to silent. We have a hashtag here. A couple of my team will be tweeting, but please feel free to tweet and get things going. And we will write a report afterwards and put in the various tweets that are coming through from the day as well. I think you've probably all found the ladies and gents facilities down there on the left. And we do have a photographer mark at the back. If you don't want to be photoed, perhaps sit over here, or if you see the camera pointing at you, just wave at him and he'll avert the camera. And the final thing is, you're all on a mailing list. If you wish to be taken off it, please let me or one of my team or Danny know, because we'll continue to send you information about funding opportunities or particular initiatives around the low carbon energy, clean energy, whatever we want to call it, opportunities. So with that, I'll finish and pass to myself because I'm chairing the next session. Okay, so our first session is really a scene setter. It's called What and Where Are the Global Opportunities? Now, we've got 3 keynote speakers. Chris Bagley from the KTN is going to describe the landscape. He's openly admitted to me that this is something they're looking at. So we'll hear from Chris what the landscape is, what the attitude is, the interest around from KTN and Innovate UK in helping businesses and academics to work with. Fran and Tessa will talk more about the global shift to clean tech and their own experiences working in Africa, elsewhere, and reminding us that the private sector has a very important role in international development, its impact reaching far beyond the products and services which are actually sold. So I'd like to invite, to set the scene for us, Chris Bagley from the KTN. Chris is Head of Energy at the Knowledge Transfer Network, where he leads a team whose role is to simplify the UK energy innovation landscape. So, wow. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andre. Morning, ladies and gents. As you heard, my name's Chris Bagley. I'm Head of Energy at the Knowledge Transfer Network. It is a real pleasure to be here with you today. As has already been said, this development, the international development and the emerging market side of things is new territory for us. And I'll cover a little bit about why that was, why that is as we go along. Let me just have a look what the KTN is, what it does. As I go through this presentation, I'd like you to bear with me, because as we go along, some of you will start thinking, I'm in the wrong place. This has got nothing to do with non-traditional markets. He's talking about the UK energy sector. What's going on here? As we get towards the end, I hope it'll all become apparent why I'm doing that. So this is us, the Knowledge Transfer Network. We are the UK's innovation network. We're a sister organisation, if you like, to Innovate UK. One thing important to note is we do not have money. I will say this a number of times as we go through this. But what we do is try and point people to areas where there is money and try and get people together such that they can make the use of that money. So we exist to bring people together to develop stuff and get that stuff, importantly, out there where it can make a difference to people's lives. Making a difference to people's lives means that end user gets stuff, and that stuff can be a thing or it can be a service, or the people that are producing stuff are making a business out of it. So that is what we exist to do. That's what Knowledge Transfer Network is about. How do we do that? Well, we do a number of things. We think in a strategic fashion. We like to think we think in a strategic fashion, and there are lots of networks, there are lots of groups of people that do what they do very well. What we try to do as that innovation network is bring together the unusual suspects, bring together the strange bedfellows, and we connect the people who wouldn't usually meet up. And how do we do this? We've got a network of around 60,000 plus individuals, and that spans 17 focus areas. And I'll come to those areas a little bit later on, but that comes from medical, agri-tech, defence, aerospace, ICT, lots of different areas. 17 of these communities all come together. We sit in the middle of this, bringing these people together and acting as a way of making the touch points happen. And it's those touch points that innovation actually sparks. I've said we're interdisciplinary. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is bring together all those different areas where there are people quite happily head down being an expert in mathematical computing, and let them understand that in energy we have issues and problems in distributed generation. So please come along and help us. And it's entrepreneurial. We're very, very business focused. We link with academia. We tend to link with the more applied side of academia. If you had to split things, about 80% of what we do is business oriented, the 20% is looking at the research base and trying to feed that research into a point where it can be used, developed and exploited by industry. When I say industry based, the majority, about 75% of the people with whom we deal are SMEs, and it's the S and the micro rather than the S and the medium that we deal with. That's not to say we don't deal with the large enterprises. We do, because that's where a lot of SMEs need to take their processes, their developments and their products. So we deal with the large enterprises and try and feed them up. And that's the entrepreneurial element that we try to bring into this. And commercial, we don't have any money. What we do try to do is introduce people to the public funding, the private fundings, the various investment elements that are out there. We are predominantly public funded oriented. However, we are developing our understanding, and I'll put my hand up now, our understanding about the emerging clean tech funding market is not an area in which we can say that we are experts. We're trying to get expertise in there, but it's an area which is growing like no one's business. A few years ago, it didn't even exist. So this is an area in which we're very, very keen to make further engagement. So that's the sort of thing that we do. Looking now at some of the energy side of things. Our energy system, the UK energy system, is changing. Without doubt, a few years ago I was going around saying, unless we get things sorted out, the lights will start to go out. And I did used to say about 4 years ago, in 2014 the lights will start going out. Thankfully I've been proven wrong. However, our energy system is creaky. It's driven by two things, our change. One is the ageing infrastructure. We've got lots and lots of very old generating plants around the UK. It's coming to the end of life. new plant needs to be built. We also need to address the trilemma. Now, you can argue long and hard whether trilemma is a real word. However, it exists as a theory, as a philosophy, if you like. The need to deliver energy which is affordable, sustainable, and secure. Have that against an ageing, expensive infrastructure, and you've got a problem. There's a number of causes that are going into this. Energy production is changing. The introduction of more renewables means that we've got less flexible generation. There's inherent intermittency in the renewables. It's not a bad thing, it's just a fact. A lot of these are intermittent, less flexible in dispatch. That means that things need to be put in place to make these new generating systems come together. There's a mixture of central and local generation. The old system, that system which we have that is creaking, a number of very large single point generators, a grid that sends everything out and it pushes all that energy out. That's changed. Central and local changes going on. And the consumers, we used to consume energy without thinking about how do we produce it. I imagine there's a number of people in the room, they've got PV on their roof. You are a producer. That never used to happen. So feeding that back into the system is a difficulty. So the whole system is changing. As that energy supply changes, people change their habits, the usage profile changes, so there are shifts in the demand pattern. Government stimulation is coming in. We're trying to work out how the government can support this changing market. Electrification and heat transport, we're moving to a more electric environment. So there's another element that's come into the play there. Overall, against that change, there are system concerns. It says there the capacity margin is less than 5%, considerably less than 5%, I'd suggest at the moment. Not many years ago, the safe capacity margin was around 15%. So we're in a position where we've got a very dynamically changing environment, demands are changing, production of energy is changing, and energy just isn't just electricity, it's heat, it's combustible gases and so on and so forth. And that margin, that safety margin, the buffer that keeps the lights on, is getting lower and lower. And we don't have the infrastructure there to help us have that nice, warm, happy feeling. So we've got a complicated and uncertain landscape that's ahead of us. So as I've said, that demand-led control of supply going out is changed. We're having to balance supply and demand. It's a multi-directional, interdependent vectors, and it's generating at multiple sites and scales. So there's lots of strange things going on. Against that uncertainty and complexity, whenever that occurs, there's opportunity. And there is opportunity there to respond to that. And there are things that are happening. Some of the opportunity areas aren't anything to do with energy. So the whole hairy, clanky power station builders, grid engineers aren't necessarily the people that hold the key to this. There's a lot of more unusual suspects that come into this. If you're in the energy area, there's integration of the renewables, balancing systems, so on and so forth. But the built environment has a place to play in this. Having a new, revised built environment, why have, if you're building new systems, why have an AC system? If you've got something that's generating in DC, why change it? There's new packets of infrastructure that can be put in place. Linking all this up, philosophically and literally, physically, ICT and digital. There's a whole new area of computing, ICT, digital infrastructure. People that would not necessarily consider themselves involved in the energy market can now join what's going on in the energy landscape. So we've got a changing environment, we've got a very demanding change, and we've got a number of new players that can come in and bring solutions to that change. So how can they do that? One of the first mechanisms that's in place, launched January this year, the DECC Community Energy Strategy. Up until January this year, DECC didn't have a strategy for community energy. Now, you could say, what you've just said now, Bagley, there wasn't community energy. People weren't generating things locally. Reasonable point. But people are using energy in their communities. And there was no strategy to look at how is the most appropriate energy supply being delivered to those communities. So community energy strategy was put in place, a £10 million fund to look at urban communities. And it started to work quite well. Some of the key points that are coming out already. There's over 60 megawatts of community-owned renewable energy projects out there. So people are doing things, and they're doing things that's putting kit on the ground, in rooftops, and it's working, and it's generating. Interesting points, as I've said a number of times, we don't have money, but communities are investing in this. So communities are getting involved and putting over 17 million into renewable electricity systems. The prediction is, if this rate of development continues, that by 2020, we're looking at over 320 million invested in community energy. This is just in the UK. The so what behind that is people, investment, funding community has an interest in things that can contribute to distributed generation, secure generation, clean generation. The interest is there. This is a good thing. There's more information on the detail behind that on that URL. All these slides, by the way, will be available afterwards, and so you don't need to scribble notes. Second thing that's happened, the Localised Energy Systems Call. Again, in January this year, TSB as they were then, but Innovate UK, excuse me, put together a call to look at localised energy systems. Traditionally, the TSB, IUK calls, or Innovate UK calls, were quite siloed in technology. Develop a new battery, develop a new tidal turbine. This challenge was very much look as it's in the round. Develop a distributed generation or a community level system. Also look at all the elements that go into that. How, when will this be used? How will it be fed? What will the impact be on that local community? Competition ran. There's £11 million in there from Innovate UK and EPSRC. 15 projects were funded out of that. There's an example of 6 of them there. They're quite generic and they cover a bunch of different areas. The guys that ran that competition said that they could easily have funded many, many more projects had they had the money there. So again, there's a lot of interest here, not just as we've seen previously in the investment community, there's interest and there's actual work going on in the stuff development community. So people out there, the innovation ecosystem is alive and it's coming up with things that can work in the localised energy environment. So what we do have is a really good, healthy innovation ecosystem that's addressing the UK. And what's this got to do with non-traditional markets? Well, one of the things that we need to look at, this statement, this quote, is chronologically dated, I suppose. The sad thing is, it's not actually dated in the effect of what's happening out there. This is still a fact. This is stuff that's going on out there at the moment. Now, you can look at this and think, well, yeah, that's a problem. The people affected by this, I would suggest, have, at best, they would like an ageing infrastructure. They don't have an infrastructure. And they all have that trilemma. They may not know it as the trilemma. What they want is clean, secure, and sustainable energy. So what we've been looking at that's been happening in the UK is stuff that could, perhaps, feed into resolving some of the issues that we see here. So we have an ecosystem that's working in the UK. It could go abroad. Now, what we could do is simply take a lot of our technology and move it overseas. That perhaps would not work very well. There's an example here. This is Danny and a couple of our colleagues a couple of years ago in Latin America, going out and looking at why a number of energy systems that had been exported had failed and what's going on. And the way to do it is not to send out an email survey. It's to get on the ground and go out there and ask people what's going on. And this is the kind of thing that they were looking at. Battery systems, small PV systems that had fallen into disrepair. Why weren't people using this? Quite simply, the battery had failed. And the individuals, the family that owned this, didn't have the money or the wherewithal to replace that battery. So they put a plastic bag over it and they left it there. When they got a bit of money, what did they do? Well, they didn't go out and buy a new battery because they weren't entirely sure where to get that from, and it would have cost an awful lot anyway. So they extended their housing, which is rather a nice thing to do. We all like to do that. And the battery system got put to one place and the chicken found itself a nice new home. It's grand, chicken was happy, but that's not what all this was about. So what we've got here is a system that goes into place, but it doesn't have the support, it doesn't have the infrastructure, the training, the business model in place to make this work. So that's why we can't take all that stuff and just drop it into another country and hope that it works. So, final bit, as well as the chicken having a nice place to stay, the more serious problem was batteries just got littered around all over the place. And so you get kids coming along thinking, oh, this is a container with water in it, stick their finger in, and unfortunate side effects. So there's a real problem out there. So what now? I say it's not no easy answer, it's doable. It probably is an easy answer, it's just not rocket science. There's just 4 things we need to look at. The technology. Is the technology appropriate for where it's going? A number of you will be aware of technology readiness levels. What about a deployment readiness level? Is this ready to be deployed where you want it? Maybe ready to be deployed in Europe, not necessarily somewhere else in an emerging market. Is what you've got scalable? And can you produce this in a manner which is suitable for where it's going? The business model. Business markets are different, completely different. And new markets don't necessarily want old technology. They don't need the old technology. Many of you see the picture of an African tribesman on his smartphone in the bush selling a goat. It's grand. It's leapt everything that we've got in the UK. So you don't want old technologies. You've got to put something new in. But simple is good. Remember, this is going into a demanding environment. Funding. Yet again, we don't have the funding. As we've seen, there's public, there's private funding. As you're going to hear later on, there's some charity funding out there that makes these things work. And contacts. It's getting those contacts out there. Contact with end user community, getting the training out there, and the feet on the ground. What I hope is going to happen as we go through today, you'll have examples of how each of those areas can and is being addressed in real time, real people doing things. Final plug for the KTN. How can we help with all that? I mentioned that we've got quite a diverse community. It's a busy slide. What that shows you, right from the top there, electronics and sensors, through to the bottom in health, those are the communities in which we work. It's an incredibly cross-sectoral, interdisciplinary area, and what we exist to do is try and bring people together. We'll only be a small part of that jigsaw puzzle, but we'd be really, really happy to help where we can. I don't know if we've got time for questions, but what we will do is lead on and listen to some really interesting work about people that are actually out there doing things now.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Does anybody have a specific question for Chris? Otherwise, I do plan to move on and then have a discussion session at the end. Anything specific? No. Well, thank you, Chris, and we'll move on and then have a discussion. So, as I said, we have 2 keynotes now. One will follow the other. Franz, I believe, is first. Have you? Yes, that's first. So, Franz is CEO of Solar Century, and whilst Chris has said UK started to look at this marketplace, Franz has been working there since 1998, so well done, Franz, at the forefront. So they've won multiple awards for product innovation, and Franz will talk about global shift to clean technology and the crucial role that solar energy actually plays in this shift. Franz, would you like to take the podium? Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here today and share some thoughts, ideas, things we work on. But one of the major topics, I think we all agree, is the biggest challenge humanity is facing today. That's where I would like to talk about first. And at the same time, Chris mentioned it, it's a huge entrepreneurial opportunity as well of our lifetime. If we look at the challenges we are facing, basically are 4 major events. Emergence, the urbanization, is driving the current and future energy supply and demand imbalance. And if you look at the population, it's growing by over 75 million people a year. And in 2020, or 2012 already, we are at 7 billion people. In 2050, it's potentially 9.6 billion. So that's a huge challenge to face. And then we talk about energy security. The political conflict we see is driving a movement to ensure long-term economic prosperity. And if you look at the Western world and Russia, a major gas supplier for Europe, the war in the Ukraine and the MENA region, which has a lot of oil fields, which we are dependent on, and then the economics. Fossil fuel development and exploitation is becoming increasingly expensive, and shale gas, the next gen fossil fuel, it's, if you ask me, a big joke. Shell pulled back completely after losing billions. This is not going to be the next gen. We have to go renewables. We have to go in a more sustainable way, because also we have a climate challenge, of course. We need to reduce the carbon that we emit. There is potentially $6 trillion at risk, unburnable carbon assets, stranded assets on balance sheets of the big oil and gas companies. And in order to avoid the 2 degrees, more than 2 degrees world temperature. So that's a big challenge we're facing. But on the other hand, we make progress. Yeah? We see key renewable energy sources like wind and solar, the cost going down, and particularly solar. A lot of areas we meet grid parity already. And if you talk about the predictions from analysts, some quotes here, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change expects 80% of the world's energy supply could be done with renewables by 2050. And then the International Energy Agency is predicting that the generation of renewable to rise up by 45% and make up 26% in 2020 already. So we are heading the right direction. And if you talk about investments, the same organization predicts by 2030, $5,500 billion investment in the renewable space. And now latest Lord Stern report on low carbon energy thinks that half of the new electricity generation can be with renewables in not more than 15 years from now. And if we then look at the announcement last week, I don't know whether you've seen it in the paper, but for me that's really also a sign of the time. The Rockefellers, who revolutionized the oil industry in the early years, they pull back completely from the oil and gas industry now. This is really a sign of the time, and they reinvest $50 billion in clean tech. And for sure there's more to follow. So this is really a game changer. We are in the twilight of a great energy era, and the global shift to clean technology is irreversible, if you ask me. This is another graph which makes you think about what's happening. It's focusing on solar. Solar, I believe, is the major energy source for the future. It's high technology. And if you look at this graph, you see prices for oil and gas and coal from 1994 till now, 2012. And you see from 2006 they started to look at the kilowatt hour price for solar average and the price down. So this is really a huge, huge change. The potential to cover with solar energy, all current energy demand is 25 to 800 times, according to this Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And if you look at where we are today, 2012, there was cumulative 100 gigawatt installed globally on solar. Last year, 37 gigawatt is added to it, and this year, most likely, more than 50 gigawatt. So you can see we are at the tipping point, and this report from Alliance Bernstein is in particularly very interesting because it shows on a real dollar per million British thermal unit equivalent basis that it is competitive with gas and oil. And it's just a tiny bit what is installed, solar. If you talk about the whole energy production, it's just 0.17%. But already now it has a big impact. It is unstoppable. And here you see some other analysts, UBS and Macquarie. They say also that this whole transition is a death spiral for the utilities. because they have stranded assets. They cannot compete with wind and solar on the spot market. If there's abundance of solar, abundance of gas, of wind, they will be cheaper, of course. There is no fuel requirement. And gas and coal-fired power plants, they lose money. And a lot of utilities in Europe, in particularly around and in Germany, they are in big problems. And that will happen at some point in UK as well. So we need to address that, and we need to manage that in a decent way. So this energy transition has a huge impact. It has winners and it has losers. And the ones who are not changing, they won't be there tomorrow, for sure. And if the amount of penetration is a bit higher, let's say about 1.7%, even oil and gas companies, they will face these challenges that the utilities do today. So if you look at the amount of investment, Bloomberg New Energy Finance is predicting 3.2 trillion annually from 2030, 25% of all energy investments. In 2012 already you saw more divestments in oil and gas, net, and investments, net, in clean tech. So yeah, that's a very, very good thing that we see. Then about Solar Century. Solar Century is established in 1998. I joined the company 2.5 years ago. I'm Dutch, as you might have recognized from my dialect. I can't hide that. The company is established to do something good and to show that we can do things in a different way. In the early years, pioneering. And today it's in a very good shape. We have no debt, and we started with a new strategy to go more in emerging markets. So today we have office in UK, our headquarters. We are in the Netherlands, Benelux, but in particular we are now in South Africa with an office, in Ghana for West Africa, we are in Kenya for East Africa, we are in Mexico with an office, in Panama, as well in Chile. So we see the emerging markets as a huge opportunity, and that's where the future is. But also the UK, of course. We will be at grid parity, competing with oil and gas or with the fossil power at some point, even in this country with not that amount of sun annually. So another important thing is that in 2006 we established SolarAid, our charity sister company. 5% of our profits go there to address the challenges we are all busy with, which is a good thing, but also it helps us to a certain extent in these emerging markets because we much better understand it. More to that. So clean tech, clean energy industry in emerging markets has the opportunity to develop more efficiently, more effectively, and because we are able to leapfrog current technologies, like what happened in the IT industry, the telecoms, how the personal computer impacted the information industry, so will local, sustainable, clean energy generation and smart grid impact the energy sector. In the telecom sector, Africa has successfully leapfrogged Europe's landline and relied on cell phone companies to provide access to the majority of the population. And like the cell phone towers, wind and solar and micro hydropower projects can be built quickly with local deployment, close to where people need them, and without major environment impacts. This is what we call distributed energy. So Solar Century in Africa is working top-down. Economy and ecology go hand in hand here. And we identified quite a few interesting opportunities where we don't need any support from governments. We just want the government to support the energy transition, to facilitate, to change directives and rules and to do things differently. And so today we develop projects for multinationals, for instance, who are big power users, which have a grid connection, but the grid is weak, there are power outages. There is a diesel generation to back up, because these factories need to run, but it's very expensive, maybe $35–40 per kilowatt hour. And we can easily install a big power plant with solar, 1.1 megawatt on their land. Private wire. We don't have anything to do today there with the utility or with the DNO, the grid owner. We can stay private wire. We sign a power purchase agreement with the multinational in US dollar cents, and we have an assured investment with the multinational, and we are able to reduce the energy bill by 1/3 easily, and have a good return for the investment as well. So that's good. We do that on shopping malls now, and we build this portfolio, and we try to look to see whether we can set up our own fund to finance these emerging market opportunities. So this is, I believe, moving very fast now. And in contrast, SolarAid is bringing solar bottom up, help the economy and the ecology in the same way, or in the same way, but in a different manner. So why did Solar Century invest in SolarAid? Why did we set that up in 2006? So according to the United Nations, the Human Development Report, the current situation is that 1.6 billion people have no access to electricity. It's even more when I understand Chris. 1.15 billion children have no access to education. 1 billion people have no clean drinking water. And climate change is creating additional challenges. On top of that, 600 billion people undernourished. 1,800 billion people lack of clean drink water, and 330 billion people are threatened by floods. So this is another risk that we human beings on this planet have to face. Potentially over 3 billion potential climate refugees, and we need to prevent that is happening. So since the inception in 1998, Solar Century wanted to invest to aid development in work in Africa, help alleviate poverty, spread happiness, and improve healthcare, and enable better standards of living. These ambitions always been part of the company's culture, along with an entrepreneurial approach, ambition to tackle climate change and make solar accessible for all. In business and for higher purpose, solar for social good. And SolarAid, like I said, is founded in 2006 and have been very successful over the years. Solar Century provided financial and physical support for campaigning, but otherwise, the SolarAid is a separate entity. A highly unique structure in a charity world, and a critical part of why we believe SolarAid is to become the successful charity it is today, has become the charity it is today. Solar has benefited over 8 million people in Africa to date. And we wanted to impact the market and make a difference by overcoming many of these unique challenges in Africa that so often undermine the good intentions of other charities operating in this region. So key to SolarAid's success was establishing a solar enterprise called Sunny Money. All profits are reinvested back into the organization, enabled SolarAid to be a commercially viable, self-sufficient organization. The business model makes more sense, and we are not over-reliant, SolarAid is not over-reliant to fundings from banks and grants and the like. And I would like to leave it now to Tessa to talk about SolarAid's business model and its great achievements. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Tessa, if you'd like to come up. So, Tessa is Corporate Partnerships Manager at SolarAid, and she's one of these fascinating people with a great big handbag with all kinds of weird things in it. So she's going to show you.
Yes, I always carry props, so I think it helps. Thank you very much. Thanks, Fran. So SolarAid, I'm going to say we're a success story in emerging markets, and I'm going to share with you today from our side how we've managed to take advantage of the opportunity that is clean energy. When I'm talking, I'm referring a lot at the moment to a study by the Global Off-Grid Lighting Association, of which we're a member. They published a report earlier this year called Investing in Off-Grid Lighting, which has some really interesting facts and figures that I think is very useful. So just to introduce us, so we are, as Fran said, we're a charity, and we wholly own a social enterprise called Sunny Money. So you can see how that works. Solar Aid in the UK, Sunny Money in Africa. We're recognised by the World Bank as being the largest distributor of solar lights, and we're working in Kenya, Malawi, Tanzania and Zambia, and we've just recently opened up in Uganda. So we can move the slides on a little
Just
bit.
click on your mouse.
Oh, brilliant, sorry. Okay, so I think there's been a load of facts and figures actually about how many people in Africa don't have access to electricity, but it's really most Africans, most people that live in Africa, about 110 million households don't have access to electricity. And they're reliant on kerosene, batteries or candles for lighting. It's about $4.4 billion a year that they spend on these products, and globally it's $30 billion. That's a lot of money. And just to put that in context, if you replaced kerosene, batteries or candles with solar, that would cost $3 billion annually, saving $27 billion. So these are people below the poverty line who effectively, if we made a clean energy transference today, we could be saving them or giving them $27 billion into their pockets. So we set up Sunny Money, which is a social enterprise, to serve these customers, these people living below the poverty line. And we think that's a huge reason for our success. So we have customers, not beneficiaries. And I think that you value what you pay for, and we can see this in our customer feedback. So people really value what they've paid for. They've made an investment in their future. And it really switches the power balance for us. So we're very much about our sales and our uptakes, and we have customer warranties. So we're very responsive to our customers because we have to be to survive, like any business. So this is a problem. And this is a little kerosene lamp. I've actually borrowed this from Sunlight, the Indian solar manufacturers that have a stall out there. So this is a kerosene lamp. And this here is a D-Light product, an S2, which we're selling about 60,000 of these a month at the moment. And I have our bigger solar product here, which is a Green Light Planet product. So this is a kerosene lamp. This is a child studying by kerosene lamp. Kerosene is really dirty, it's dangerous and it's expensive. So we have reports of children knocking over their kerosene lamps as they study in treated mosquito nets that the Aid World promotes. They go up in a flash, and we have very often accounts in the office of fatalities from this. Also poisoning, kerosene stored in water bottles, so children often drink it. And it contributes to indoor air pollution, which kills 400,000 people a year in Africa. So it's really dangerous, it's really dirty. You can see from that picture it's just a bad product, doesn't really work. And also from our customer feedback that people spend 15% of their income on kerosene for lighting, which I think is a travesty. And here we are, the solution is solar. So children can study an extra hour each evening with the solar light. Parents notice that they are improving in their grades, and we have had head teachers telling us that too. People have better health, about 60% of our customers report that. And parents spend the savings that they get from buying this product, which is around $70 a year on average, on food, education and farming inputs. So we're offering our customers straight away the ability to make a practical life improvement when they've bought our products. And then some graphs for you. So Franz and Solar Century have really supported us since 2006. And you'll notice that the graph, I don't know if you can see it from there, but starts at 2010. That's because we spent 4 years failing, not really knowing what we were doing, trying different things. And then about 2009, when the cost of solar dropped dramatically, and we started this social enterprise and started selling, we were onto something. So from then until now, we've sold 1.3 million solar lights, impacting over 8 million people. And now Of our charity revenue, or our revenue, 44% comes from light sales. And those surpluses get reinvested into selling more lights, R&D, and expansion, which was our Uganda initiative. So doing business differently. So with no shareholders, we can concentrate on making Sunny Money profitable over the long term. I think that we're trying to be a global example, and that's why I've said, we're a success story. But unless we're turning a profit and we're showing others that you can make a viable business in these communities, we're not really... sorry. There you go. We can't really say anything. We can't really be an open source model. So we were recently at the Clinton Global Initiative, where we made a commitment that we were going to become profitable when entering a market within 3 years, so 36 months. And then we'll use our expertise to spread and share knowledge. So we're nearly there. Projections show that we should be profitable in all 4 of our countries within a few years. So then we'll start open sourcing our information. But for now, I think it's useful for you to see our model. So I think for us, it's really important that we have local knowledge and expertise. So we have about 150 really smart Africans working in our sales teams. It's a really great thing to be able to recruit with a social mission in mind on the African continent. So we really do attract the best staff. And we're also, because we're self-governing, as Fran said, they donate their profits to us, and they let us fail for 4 years without pulling the funds. We really concentrate on our customers. Those are our key audiences, not the shareholders, not Solar Century, our customers. So we've made some mistakes. We've embedded ourselves in the market. We started manufacturing solar products in Africa. That didn't work. We started designing products. That was horrendous. And now what we've realised is selling is really the way that embeds and sustains a market for our customers. So we're allowed to be flexible. It's very hard to sell products to the bottom of the pyramid. It takes a change in attitude for all of us, and it's a tricky market. So you need low-cost, low-margin products that you sell at volume to make a profit. We also encourage competition. So we are a very kind of disruptive model, and I've got 2 really great examples of how we encourage competition. One is in our Zambian teams, they reported to us that as they moved around... Is that my chart?
It's somebody's phone. I've got the bell.
Good, okay, ring the bell anyway. So our Zambian teams were reporting that as they were moving around selling solar products, a day behind was another truck following them, undercutting, selling products less quality at a lower rate. They were really upset about this, but for SolarAid, that's a massive success to encourage competition into our markets, where we start these markets at 0 to 1% penetration. So encouraging competition is a really great thing. We also have a Tanzanian business called Off-Grid Electrics that sells solar home systems, and we end at this product here with USB charging, who say that when they go into a market, and SolarAid have been there, people understand about solar. So, leading the way. So we have the right leadership in place. It's been really important to us that we've had people like Jeremy Leggett, Steve Andrews, our outgoing CEO, Fran's the CEO of Solar Century, to really understand and promote what we're doing. They have an appetite for risk, and they understand that social problems are never going to be solved through aid alone. There is a place for aid, of course. I'm not saying that there isn't, but we don't believe that it's fast enough for us, and we believe that there is room to do this differently. Another thing that's really helped on how we are and how we lead the way is that we have a goal. So we announced this goal at the CGI last week, and our goal is to eradicate this kerosene lamp from Africa by the end of the decade. We have to sell about 250 million solar products to get that done, and we can't do that alone. So that's why we're asking people to help us and join us in doing this. And I think the main reason for us to get profitable is to bring other people into this mix. I know that a social mission is really compelling, but I do understand that profits do move people in different ways. We also use our experience to lobby and advocate for change. So one of the most difficulties for us at the moment is VAT and tariffs on solar products. So we're very intimately involved with things like renewable energy associations in the countries that we work in. And this, for any kind of small and medium enterprise looking to go into these areas and into the bottom of the pyramid markets, really needs to understand that you need a concert of other weapons in your arsenal to really attack these problems. So we've had loads of challenges along the way, and the key issues for our business really are broken markets and stock outages, which I won't bore you with, but I wanted to talk to you about the barriers for our customers. So the key barriers to market entry are trust and affordability. So our customers live in a lack of information. They're very rural, they don't have access to newspapers or the internet. So for them to trust that this product that we're showing them works and is viable, it takes a lot. It's a lot more than you or me. They don't have the money to risk these financial decisions. So we've worked now through head teachers, and that was our biggest breakthrough. We work through head teachers with the local education authorities, and head teachers are a source of trust in their communities. They tell the teachers tell the pupils, and the pupils tell mum and dad. And mum and dad, in an African context, will invest in their children's education. So we also sell these as study lights, and that really helps our sales. That's the kind of difficulties that we experience on a daily basis, thankfully not me, but this is our teams in Kenya. So these are the kind of things you have to think about. This is not an easy market. You will be stuck in the mud. To overcome these challenges, we really believe it's about understanding your customer and investing in getting to know them. So we have a very large research and impact team that's collected 13,000 research interactions to date. We get hundreds of customer stories in the office every day about our products and about how people are using them. This is a great quote from Banerjee saying the poor have to be sophisticated economists just to survive. So you're having to understand you're talking to a sophisticated customer here, much more sophisticated than me and you with our surplus of income. And the main challenge here, and this came out in the Global Off-Grid Lighting Report, and I really want to make this clear, is not supply, is not that the demand isn't there, but it's that the supply isn't there. So if there's any message I want to leave us all with today, is that there are not enough people concentrating on these markets. We're saying all these figures, isn't it terrible? People are studying, going to bed, having their children use this kerosene lamp every day, and there needs to be more people entering this market. So I mentioned that we're the largest distributor of solar lights according to the World Bank. We're in 5 African countries, so that shows you the market size. This is Priscilla, a customer of ours in Zambia with her solar light. And then the opportunity. So as I said, that there's a lot of demand there. Ban Ki-moon is now becoming on board. We saw that quote from 2010, I think it was, Chris. This is just last year. Energy is a golden thread that connects economic growth, environmental health, social fairness and opportunity. So with climate change squeezing household incomes, cheap renewable energy is looking more attractive. In a really base level, if people are saving money, they have more money to spend on Unilever products or health products or malaria nets, things like that. So that's one way of really explaining the demand. We have saved, so we've got 8 million people that we've supported, and we've saved them $285 million since 2009. So imagine what they could spend that on. When we know they spend it on food, education and farming inputs, but another thing they could spend it on is bigger products, solar home systems, solar lights with USB connectivity, wind, hydro. There is a demand, and that's what we're meeting, and I'm really hoping that today and as we go forward that we're really galvanising competition, and we very much welcome it. And I'm just going to end with one of our customers' children, Valette, who was having problems at school, and her mother was extremely worried, but she reported to us the other day, my daughter is now number 1 in the class, and that's why we're here. So that's me.
Thank you. If you'd like to join us here, Tessa. If Franz and Chris, you'd like to just come up and answer any questions, that would be great. Thank you. We've heard from our three speakers that there's a pressing and urgent need for sustainable energy, not just in developing countries that Tessa's talked about, but our failing system here in the UK. We're looking for innovation, new ideas, more companies to step up. So I think we've got the foundation for a really useful conversation. So does anyone have a first question? Yes. So if you could just wait for the microphone, and would you mind just saying who you are? Thank you.
Mark Bornhoff from Carbon Limiting Technologies. Just a question for Tessa. How do your customers pay for the upfront cost of the lights? And what sort of innovation have you had to provide in terms of financing models and credit?
Great. So our entry-level lights cost $10, and our customers are living below the poverty line of $1.50 a day. So there is a big mismatch there. Eleanor White is going to come this afternoon and talk about our light library pilots in Senegal, where you could borrow a light as you could borrow a book. And that increased our uptake because it dealt with the trust issue for people. And they were able to see the product working, make savings, and then invest. But the real thing that we're doing going forward, and I know that Sunlight are also looking at this, is a pay-as-you-go light that will mirror the cost of kerosene. So we've worked with our Chinese manufacturers to embed a chip that works via a Bluetooth. So you can play a Bluetooth tone to your phone and it unlocks it for a period of time until the light's yours. We're doing our first commercial trials of that, but it's a huge issue.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Jenny. If you could just...
Hi, Tessa. It's Divyesh from Sunlight. I'm partner. Tessa, I just wanted to ask you, can you actually tell us the difficulties you have dealing with governments and politics and trying to actually ensure how you get in? Because commercially, it's quite a minefield in every one of these countries because they have their own rules and regulations. Do you have something like a policy where you get all your manufacturers go together and lobby to the government? Or what do you do to actually get these duties out? Because your product may be cheap as possible, but by the time it gets to the end user, it's unaffordable, as you know.
So all the VAT and tariffs have to be passed on to the end user. Because of how we're working with such small margins. So we've recently with the Kenyan government done something called Kick Out Kerosene, the Kick Out Kerosene Coalition. And the Kenyan government just ignored it. They put 16% on VAT and tariffs earlier in the year. And we were able to lobby with our manufacturers and other policy actors to actually get that taken away, which was a real boon. In Malawi, we're working with the Renewable Energy Association. And I think there, which I didn't explain on my talk, but there is why it's great to have a company such as Solar Century, a charity such as Solar Aid, and a social enterprise, because all three organisations can play different roles. So with Solar Aid, we're a market-building NGO, and we can work with the education authorities in a different way than Sunny Money would commercially. So it's difficult and it's a nightmare. And I think another really strong thing is the African staff that we have. So we have really great staff that work tirelessly on this for us. So I don't know if that's a great answer, but the only one I have.
No, it's just the challenges, as you said. I mean, one of the things I would like to bring up is Lighting Africa, which is one of the standards bodies which actually uses as a lobbying, World Bank lobbying group. Would that not be an avenue where that would actually be an avenue to actually go to these agencies through an organization such as yourself and get East African or West African countries to agree a tariff?
Amazing.
It's just a suggestion.
No, that's an amazing suggestion, and I think, as I pointed, we're really trying to make ourselves credible. Selling 1 million lights goes some way to doing that. In some circles, so you talk to IKEA or Unilever or, they don't care. But we're trying to make ourselves credible such that we can then partake in these kind of lobbying and policy. And only very recently we've really got enough revenue now to start. We have a policy officer in the UK, which is a big start for us. So, yeah.
Okay, yes, in the middle, please.
Hello, Mark Howard, Store Electric. These policies are excellent for addressing the domestic and even the village scale problem with a bank of solar panels that can help them out greatly. But the forecast is that all of the population growth in the next 30 years is going to be urban. So what are you going to be doing about the larger population centres, and how are you going to provide power to the groups of, say, 250,000 up to about 5 million in relatively concentrated areas?
Franz, is
Is
that your
to me?
question?
Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. What we see there is often in these urban areas is grid, but the grid is very weak, and there's a huge need for power supply. So what you see is a lot of diesel generation, and as we all know, the prices of oil and gas are increasing extremely. So it is an economic viable opportunity. Prices for diesel generation are generally, let's say, lowest in the 25 US dollar cents up to 45 US dollar cents. So what we see is it makes a lot of sense. But so for a saving maybe for 30% on the power bill, and a return on an investment of maybe 20 to 25%. So that's an attractive investment, but then you have to consider the risk for the investor. How do they look at signing a power purchase agreement with an off-taker locally? So I think you have to look at the lowest hanging fruit, which are the multinationals who have invested in many countries, like now these tea growers, Unilever, Williamson Tea we work with, as well as concrete factories, cement factories. 50% of the power of their energy bill is power. And so you can easily build a 10 megawatt, which is even here in UK, is a huge investment. So it's an investment over there would be about, let's say, 14, 15 million pound. But it is an interesting opportunity. So I believe if you have a good view on the country risk itself, and you have a deal signed with a multinational in a hard currency, it's a very attractive investment. And that is what we try to prove in the years to come. So we are doing several projects. We work with property developers and owners in South Africa, Growth Point and Zenprop, the biggest there. They own a lot of buildings, they have tenants, and they want a saving on the energy bill, and we can put solar on top without any grant, without any subsidy. It's a viable project, but it's slow still, and because of the risk perceived from investors, and that is what we need to change. It's all about, in the end, an investment thing.
Yeah, I was going to ask Chris to comment as well.
Just to add into that, looking at Innovate UK's localised energy systems call, whilst the headline for that, or the most immediate element of that, is localised as in distributed generation in more remote communities, the call was very structured, and it did accept localised, could be a postcode in a city, and it could be a part of a community, a science park or whatever else. So a lot of the technologies that are emerging can work as a distributed generation miles off grid, or within, as it's described, an urban environment with a very, very weak grid, or perhaps no grid surrounding it. So they're not mutually exclusive, I think, is the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Because, if I may follow
Yes.
up, to my way of thinking, the only way that the developing world can actually develop is to create and build industry indigenously. And the two biggest problems for industry to develop indigenously are lack of transportation infrastructure and lack of power. And the only way to provide the power that's required is to be able to provide it not only when the sun's up and out, but also during the monsoon and after dark. So is there any way that you have got of addressing that?
Yeah, so we're looking at that. And the same kind of business case is introducing storage to offset diesel generation as well, and to provide power during nights or events when there is no solar generation possible. So we see that solar technology or storage technology is reducing because of the upcoming electric car movement. So we see, for instance, Tesla starting with Panasonic, a 1 gigawatt battery factory. So it is likely, it's a high technology industry as well, like solar. So there will be a learning curve, like the semiconductor, doubling the capacity, the cost will be 50% of that, on and on. It won't go to that extent for solar as well as for battery likely, but it has the same kind of characteristic, and that is the opportunity. At some point it will be competitive, and I believe storage now in these kind of let's say applications I just explained for multinational, it's viable.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call us to a close there because we do have an hour and a half for networking over lunch, so I'm sure our speakers will be very pleased to chat with people. They've certainly given us a pioneer's way forward here, because I'm sure there's others of you out here that are already in this marketplace, but we've certainly heard of the opportunities, and we've also heard about the support infrastructure here in the UK. So as our keynote speakers, I'd like you to join me, and then I'll pass on to Janet, but thank the speakers for their presentations. Thank you.